The rain fell like it had been holding back for years, sheets of water crashing down the steep slate roof of the Elridge Manor. Jacob wiped the sweat and rain from his brow as he pushed a loose wire back into its casing. The basement smelled of damp stone and mildew. His flashlight flickered, catching his reflection in the breaker box. Tired eyes, worn leather jacket, clothes clinging to him from the storm. He muttered under his breath, "Last job of the day, right?" The emergency call had come just after midnight. A blackout at the manor. A storm like this didn't care if it was Tuesday or Sunday. The rich still needed light. By 2 a.m., the worst of the fix was done. Jacob climbed the old staircase slowly, tools clinking in his belt. The whole place felt frozen in time. Mahogany banisters, faded oil portraits, a chandelier that probably cost more than his truck. But not a sound from upstairs, no staff, no footsteps, just thunder and the groan of wood shifting in the wind. He reached the main hall and zipped up his jacket, already reaching for the door. "Stay until the rain stops." The voice was quiet, almost too quiet. He turned, startled. There she stood, at the top of the staircase, barefoot, a silk robe clinging to her frame, blonde hair a little too messy for someone who supposedly lived in elegance. Her hand rested lightly on the railing, her knuckles pale. Jacob blinked. I didn't know anyone else was still up." "I couldn't sleep." Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. They flicked toward the windows like she expected someone, or something, to be watching. The silence between them stretched, awkward and strange. She didn't move. She didn't explain. He could have left. Should have. But there was something in her voice, something heavy and frayed like the sound of a record that's been played too many times. "Okay," Jacob said, almost to himself. "I'll stay, just until the rain stops." She nodded once and turned away, her footsteps vanishing into the shadows of the hall above. Jacob remained at the foot of the stairs, rainwater dripping from his boots, heart thudding with a strange weight. This wasn't just another house, and she wasn't just another client. Something was off. Something was beginning. Jacob followed the faint sound of her steps as he wandered cautiously toward the sitting room, boots echoing off the marble floor. The air inside the Elridge Manor was oddly still, too still for a house this large. He had seen places like this before, all polished furniture and heavy silence. But this one felt different. This one felt abandoned somehow. Not in the physical sense, but in spirit. Elena stood near the tall bay windows, arms folded, her back to him. She hadn't turned on any more lights beyond the ones he'd repaired. Just the warm flicker from a few wall sconces and the pale flashes of lightning spilling across the carpet. "You drink tea?" she asked suddenly, without looking. Jacob hesitated. "Sure, when there's no coffee." A dry chuckle escaped her. "I hate coffee." She turned to him. "Sit. I'll make something." He was still damp, unsure, but curiosity rooted him there. He watched as she padded away barefoot through the archway, her silk robe fluttering behind her like a ghost of something once glamorous. The room was elegant in an old-world way, velvet chairs, books that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades, and a grand piano pushed against the far wall. Its cover was cracked, 2 keys missing entirely. Dust clung to the surface. On top of it sat a delicate music box, its once golden trim tarnished. He walked over, lightly touching the edge of the piano. One key gave a dull, hollow thunk. The music box didn't sing when he turned the knob, just made a whirring noise, broken like everything else in the room. "This house doesn't echo like it used to," Elena said quietly as she returned, holding 2 steaming cups. Jacob looked up. She handed him one. Chamomile from the smell of it. "I don't think I've ever been in a house this size that felt so empty," he replied. She smirked faintly, then sat across from him, curling one leg beneath her. "Funny, isn't it? How space can feel crowded when it's full of ghosts." He studied her face now in clearer light, sharp cheekbones, pale under the soft glow. Eyes the color of sea glass, tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. She looked like someone who used to be beautiful in public, but hadn't cared to maintain the image in private for a long time. "I didn't know anyone still lived here," he said, sipping the tea carefully. "They don't," she answered, then added, "Not really. My brother visits for meetings. Lawyers. Money people. I'm just part of the furniture, I guess." Jacob gave a low hum. "Doesn't sound like you enjoy the place." "I'm not here because I want to be." Her voice had a hard edge now, guarded. "It was part of the will. I stay until certain terms are met. I can't leave. Not legally, or maybe not emotionally. Hard to say." "Must be tough," he said, not just to be polite. She tilted her head. "Is that your default setting? Quiet sympathy?" He chuckled. "No. Usually I just fix the lights and leave." Elena leaned back, studying him. "But you didn't." "No," he admitted. "I didn't." They sat in the soft hum of silence, broken only by the crack of thunder and the whimpering wind scratching the windows. The storm was getting worse, not better. The lights flickered, just briefly, but enough to make them both glance at the ceiling instinctively. "Great," he muttered. "That's the main line jittering again. Could be the transformer on the hill. Or the house just doesn't want to let go." He gave her a look. "I'm kidding," she added quickly, but her smile didn't. "Reach her eyes." Jacob took another sip of tea, holding it in his hands like warmth mattered more than taste. After a moment, she asked quietly, "You have kids?" "One. My daughter, Lucy. She's 6. Her expression softened. "Where's her mother?" Jacob hesitated. "Gone. Car accident. 2 years ago." "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "Thanks." His voice was rougher than expected. "I'm mostly just trying to keep up. Be a good dad, run the business, sleep occasionally. I do okay." "I don't think anyone in this house has done okay in years," she said, almost under her breath. Jacob set his mug down. "What happened to your family?" Elena laughed, a brittle, defensive sound. "Now there's a question you don't ask unless you're ready for a really expensive lawsuit or a bottle of bourbon." He waited. She stared at her tea. "There was a scandal, years ago. Financial stuff, politics. One of those headlines people skim over until it's their own family being eaten alive by lawyers. My mother lost her mind trying to keep the truth buried. My father died in his study. Heart attack, they said. But no one really asks how many heart attacks happen when you're being blackmailed." Jacob didn't speak. He didn't need to. She went on quietly. "After the funerals, the press faded, but the damage didn't. I got left with a house full of silence in terms of inheritance I didn't want." He looked at her again. Really looked. She didn't seem like someone who wanted pity. She seemed like someone who hadn't had a real conversation in months. Someone who'd spent too long pretending everything was fine in a house where nothing was. "I guess we're both trying to hold things together," he said finally, "just in different ways." Elena looked at him, and for the first time the sarcasm dropped. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "Do you think broken people ever really get better?" Jacob didn't answer right away. Outside, the wind howled again. The rain kept falling. The lights above them dimmed, then steadied, like even the house was holding its breath. "I don't know," he said truthfully, "but sometimes you find someone who doesn't mind the broken parts. Someone who stays anyway." They didn't say anything more after that. They didn't need to. The fire in the sitting room crackled weakly, doing its best against the dampness that clung to the old bones of the manor. Jacob sat cross-legged on the faded Persian rug, a chipped chessboard open between them, mismatched pieces scattered like tiny soldiers on leave. Elena leaned against the arm of a velvet chair, watching the board as if it were a minefield. "You're terrible at this," she said dryly, nudging her bishop toward his exposed knight. "I work with wires, not pawns," Jacob muttered, "but I'm learning. You move the same rook twice in 4 turns. I'm improvising." She smiled, the first genuine one he'd seen stretch across her face, and for a fleeting moment, she looked like someone untouched by grief or inheritance or obligation. Just a woman, curled barefoot on the edge of a storm, learning how to laugh, again. They had toasted slices of bread earlier. Well, attempted to. The ancient toaster gave up halfway, and Jacob, ever the optimist, declared the charred edges rustic. Elena had nearly choked laughing. Now the wind pressed against the tall windows like it wanted in, and the thunder had mellowed to a low growl. He reached for his mug, now empty. "You ever think about leaving all this?" She stared into the fire. "I think about it every day." "Why don't you?" Elena paused, then looked over at him. "Because inheritance doesn't always mean freedom, Jacob. Sometimes it's just a more expensive kind of prison." That surprised him. Not the sentiment, but how plainly she said it. She continued, her voice quieter now. "They wrote it into the trust. I had to live here 5 years after my father's death to get my share. My brother found ways around it, but I was the problem child. So they tethered me to the house like a stray dog on a diamond leash." Jacob tilted his head. "You don't seem like the type to be leashed." "I wasn't, until everything crumbled. Then they said I needed structure, but structure isn't the same as safety." Jacob nodded slowly. "My daughter, Lucy, she still wakes up crying sometimes, calls for her mom. I try to soothe her, sing or tell stories, but sometimes I just hold her and lie, say everything's okay when I don't know if it is." Elena's lips parted, her breath catching for just a moment. "She's lucky," she said, "to have you. She's all I've got." He smiled faintly. "And I think sometimes I'm all she's got, too." There was a soft silence after that. The kind that lingers not because there's nothing to say, but because what's already been said feels heavier than the storm outside. He leaned in to move his knight, again, poorly, and muttered, "Your move, Ellie." It slipped out. He noticed too late. She didn't flinch. Didn't correct him. He waited for the sharp retort, the well-defended boundary. But she only moved her rook, eyes still on the board. Something in the air shifted. Before either of them could speak again, a long, slow creak echoed through the manor. Jacob froze. So did Elena. It came from above them, from the second floor. A single deliberate floorboard groan. Not wind, not storm. A step. Jacob stood slowly, his hand moving to the flashlight on the table. "You expecting anyone?" Elena shook her head, color draining from her face. Her voice came out in a whisper. "No one should be up there." He moved toward the hallway, clicking the flashlight on. The beam sliced through the shadows like a blade. Another creak followed, then silence. Jacob took a breath, casting a glance back at her. She was still sitting, stiff as marble. "Stay. Here," he said. He padded toward the grand staircase, each step creaking under his boots. The storm pounded harder against the windows now, as if echoing his tension. As he reached the landing, he swept the light left and right. Nothing. Just closed doors, dust-lined wallpaper, and shadows that danced with every flash of lightning. Hallway mirror caught the beam, throwing back a distorted reflection of his tired face. Nothing moved. He checked the guest bedroom. Empty. The study. Empty. The master suite. Undisturbed. When he finally returned to the sitting room, Elena hadn't moved. Her tea had gone cold, untouched. Her arms were folded tightly around her chest. "Nothing there," he said softly. She didn't respond at first. Then, very quietly, "Sometimes I hear her heels at night." He didn't understand. "Who?" "My mother." Her voice cracked. Jacob knelt down beside her. "I thought you said she passed." "She did. 4 years ago. In this house." Elena's eyes didn't meet his. They said it was dementia. Said she was hearing things, seeing people who weren't there. But I remember. I remember hearing her walking around at night, her heels on the marble even after she couldn't remember what day it was. Like her mind forgot, but her sadness didn't. Jacob sat back, unease curling in his gut. "She said the house wasn't safe," Elena whispered. that it watched us. Long silence followed. The fire popped in the grate. "You think she's still here?" he asked cautiously. Elena looked up at him. Her eyes were not the eyes of a woman spooked by shadows. They were the eyes of someone who'd lived too long with unanswered questions, who'd learned how to carry silence like a scar. "I think the pain we don't bury finds ways to stay," she said. Jacob didn't know how to respond to that, so he sat beside her on the floor again, close, but not too close. She leaned her head back against the chair, closed her eyes. Outside, the wind screamed like something was being pulled apart at the seams. Inside, two people sat shoulder to shoulder in the flickering firelight, the chessboard forgotten between them. Neither of them spoke again that night, but something had shifted. Something had surrendered. The pale warmth of morning light poured through the long, dust-coated windows of the Elridge Manor. Rain had passed sometime during the early hours, leaving behind glassy dew on the hedges and a sky too blue to trust. Inside, Jacob stirred awake. On the sitting room couch, his neck stiff from sleeping half upright, his jacket draped over him like a second skin. For a moment, there was peace. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes and blinking at the morning. The fire was out. The storm had receded into memory, yet something in the air still hung heavy, unspoken words, untold truths. Elena was nowhere in sight. He folded his jacket and stood, glancing back at the chessboard still abandoned mid-game. As he gathered his tools to leave, he noticed something, tucked just barely into the inner pocket of his coat. A folded slip of paper. He pulled it out and unfolded it carefully. "Thanks for staying through the storm, Ellie." His thumb lingered on the curve of her handwriting, the way she'd signed it. Ellie, not Elena. No defenses, no sarcasm. It was enough to make him pause longer than he should have. But real life always caught up. By the time he stepped out into the sunlight, the estate grounds had already begun to shift. A sleek black car idled in the driveway. A sharply dressed man was speaking to one of the groundskeepers, pointing toward the manor with tight authority. Elena's brother, Jacob, guessed. The real heir. The kind of man who arrived in polished shoes with perfectly timed motives. Jacob didn't wave, didn't stop. He just made his way to his truck, the thank you note burning quietly in his pocket. Back in town, the world felt smaller, louder, easier to understand. Jacob picked Lucy up from the neighbors before school. She bounded toward him in her too big backpack, cereal on her cheek and her shoes on the wrong feet. "Daddy," she said, flinging her arms around his waist. "Did you fix the lights for the princess?" Jacob chuckled. "I did." Was she pretty? He glanced down at her, heart caught off guard. She was different. Lucy gave a wise little nod. "Maybe you can marry her and she can read bedtime stories with me." "We'll see," he said, ruffling her hair. But the idea lingered longer than he expected. He dropped her off with a kiss on the forehead and headed straight to his next job, a wiring replacement in a bakery downtown. He kept glancing at his phone, expecting nothing, hoping for something. Just after noon, it rang. The number was unknown but local. He answered anyway. "Jacob Hale?" "Yeah. Who's this?" A pause. Then a low voice. Male. Crisp. Calculated. "I'm calling on behalf of the Elridge family. I'm Elena's cousin. Don't worry, this isn't official." Jacob's gut tensed. "Okay. I'm just going to offer you something simple. Walk away." Jacob narrowed his eyes, walking toward the alley behind the bakery. "Excuse me? I'm sure she told you things. Or maybe she didn't. Doesn't matter. The point is, people who get close to her usually end up hurt. Or worse. You threatening me? I'm warning you." The voice didn't waver. "There's a history in that house, one that eats people alive. You've got a kid, right? Might be smarter to stay away from the storm." Click. The line went dead. Jacob stood there for a moment, listening to the dull hum of the power units behind the bakery and the echo of the warning in his ears. The rain was gone, but the storm wasn't over. Not even close. The chime above Jacob's workshop door jingled softly, an old bell, half rusted but dependable. He looked up from the workbench, grease on his hands, copper wire half twisted in his fingers. It wasn't a delivery, nor a regular client. It was her, or rather, a version of her. Elena wore a baseball cap pulled low and a plain cardigan over jeans. No silk, no perfume. Just a woman trying not to be seen. Jacob straightened up, confused and slightly winded by the sight of her. "You lost, Ellie?" She smiled, shy but steady. "Maybe. Or maybe I was just curious what a real workshop looks like." He handed her a rag for the drizzle that had started again outside. "I'm guessing this isn't a social visit." "Maybe it is." A small voice broke the moment. "Daddy, the music lady's here." Lucy came skipping out from the back room, holding a wooden music box in both hands. She stopped in front of Elena and pressed the tiny brass lever. The soft, melancholy tune filled the room, light and haunted. Elena froze. "That song," she whispered. "Where did you get that?" "It was in Daddy's drawer," Lucy said proudly. "He said it doesn't work right, but I fixed it." Elena knelt, her eyes glistening. "This song, it played every night in the Manor nursery. My mother said it was from her wedding. I haven't heard it in years." Lucy offered it without hesitation. "You can keep it." "No," Elena whispered, taking the box and holding it to her heart. "Thank you. But it belongs right here. You fixed it." Jacob watched them, a quiet awe in his expression. He wasn't used to seeing Elena like this, open, gentle, unguarded. Lucy had disarmed her in ways he hadn't dared try. "You're good with kids," he said. "Once Lucy ran off to play with her dolls. I never thought I would be." Elena exhaled and sat on a crate. "But she reminds me of how I used to feel before everything got heavy." Jacob offered her a glass of water. "You mean before the money?" She smiled bitterly. "Before the lies, the silence. The kind of family that tells you love is conditional and memories are optional." She looked around the workshop, cluttered, warm, alive. "This place feels real. I haven't been in a place that felt real in years." Jacob sat beside her. "You could tell me what you're running from, if you want." Elena hesitated, then nodded. "My father didn't die from a heart attack like the papers said. Not really. He was found at the base of the east stairwell, neck broken, eyes wide open like he'd seen something. They cleaned it up, made it go away. But I heard things that night. I heard him yelling. My brother was the only other one home." Jacob's face tightened. "And no one questioned it?" "Not. When your brother has the money to make it disappear." She picked at her sleeve. "They sent my mother away the year before. Said she was delusional, that she believed the house had a will of its own. She used to warn me. The house remembers. It punishes those who forget." Jacob listened, quiet and unwavering. Elena looked up at him, her voice softer now. "I know I'm hard to read. That I keep walls up. But you listen. You don't try to fix me. You just see me." Jacob's eyes didn't flinch. "That's because you're worth seeing." A pause. Elena blinked fast, her throat tightening. Before she could speak, her phone buzzed, unknown number. Just like before, one message, "Leave that man. Final warning." She stared at the screen, the air between them suddenly colder. Jacob noticed. "What is it?" She shook her head, forcing calm. "Nothing. Just noise." But he saw through her. "Elena, I'm okay." Her smile wavered. I should go. I wasn't here, remember?" Jacob stood with her, jaw clenched. "If someone's threatening you, it's not new, it's just louder now that you're involved." "I can handle loud." Elena touched his arm, gentle, brief. "I know. That's what scares them." She left with the same quiet grace she came with, the music box tune still echoing faintly from Lucy's hands. But for the first time, Jacob realized, this wasn't just a family falling apart. It was a storm with roots in the floorboards, and he was already standing in the middle of it. The call didn't come for 2 days, 2 days of silence. 2 days of rainless skies and a gut-twisting stillness Jacob couldn't shake. Every hour that passed without hearing from Elena felt like a wire tightening in his chest. He'd called, no answer. Texted, nothing. Not even a read receipt. Lucy had asked once innocently, "Is the princess gone again?" And Jacob had only managed a nod. But the truth was heavier. It felt like being left in the middle of something half-spoken, like a dream cut off before the ending. On the second night, with the moon high and hollow above him, Jacob drove to the Elridge Manor. No guards, no lights, just long shadows and silence. The gates had been left ajar. A mistake, or a message. He stepped into the manor quietly, flashlight in hand. The air inside had changed, mustier, colder, tense with stillness. Her perfume was gone, replaced with the faint scent of extinguished candles and unopened windows. "Elena?" he called gently, his voice almost lost in the high-ceilinged void. No answer. Room by room, he searched. Her shoes were gone. Drawers, emptied. But someone had gone through her things, not in packing haste, but with purpose. Letters spilled across the floor, torn pages from a notebook. A photograph of her as a girl, standing beside a piano, her mother's hand on her shoulder. Jacob's heart hammered. He moved upstairs, toward the west wing. Something caught his eye, a slight slant in the wallpaper near the attic stairs. An outline, a hidden seam. He ran his fingers along it, pressed lightly. The panel clicked, revealing a narrow door. Behind it, darkness and the scent of age. A staircase curled upward toward the rafters. Jacob climbed slowly, each creak beneath his boots, like a warning. At the top, a small attic room opened before him. Dust choked the air, boxes stacked like tombstones. And in the far corner, a trunk with a broken lock. Inside, journals, dozens of them, all belonging to Elena's mother. Jacob knelt, heart in his throat, flipping through pages filled with desperate, frantic ink. They say I forget, but I remember everything. The pills they give me make me slow, but the house doesn't forget. I hear whispers in the halls at night, footsteps that aren't mine. They want me gone. Charles says I'm sick, but I know the truth. If something happens to me, it won't be madness, it'll be them. They want to bury the past. But the house remembers. Jacob's fingers trembled. His mouth tasted of metal. "You shouldn't be here." The voice behind him was calm, too calm. Jacob turned. Elena's brother stood at the top of the stairs, a flashlight trained on him. Clean suit, cold smile. "She's not here," he said, flatly. "Elena's away, getting the help she needs." "Where is she?" Jacob's voice was ice. "She's fine. You won't be seeing her again." Jacob stood slowly, rage bubbling. "You knew about this, about your mother, about all of it." The brother shrugged. "The past is the past, and Elena, she's always had trouble telling what's real and what's not." "You mean she told the truth?" Jacob spat. The brother's eyes narrowed. "You think you're helping her? You're just another footnote in her phase, a passing act of rebellion before we clean house. Literally. I'm not going anywhere." "Then you'll go down with her." Jacob stepped forward. "You don't scare me." But the brother only smiled again, lips tight. "That's your mistake." Later that night, Jacob's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He nearly dropped it in his hurry. "Elena?" he breathed. Her voice was barely more than a sob. "I didn't want to go. They made me leave, Jake. They said, if I stayed, you and Lucy would be in danger. That they'd do to you what they did to my mom. I couldn't." He closed his eyes, holding the phone like a lifeline. "Elena, why didn't you tell me? I thought I could keep you safe if I disappeared. If I just vanished." His voice cracked. "I'm not afraid of storms, Elena." A pause. "I'm afraid of losing you in them." She cried harder, unable to speak. And he let her cry. No fixing. No platitudes. just the storm between them, and the hope they still might find each other through it. Thunder rolled like a warning in the distance, but Jacob didn't flinch. He stood at the front of his modest home, porch light flickering, watching the rain sheet down in silver curtains. It had started again, just like that first night. Storms seemed to carry her with them. He didn't expect her this time, not after the silence, not after the brother, not after everything. And yet, there she was, barefoot, drenched, standing at the edge of the driveway like a ghost given form. Elena. She stepped into the light slowly, her hair soaked, her cardigan clinging to her like a second skin. Her lips trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper, like every nerve in her body was straining toward truth. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. Jacob stared at her, heart rising into his throat. He walked forward into the rain, never hesitating, his shirt sticking to his back in seconds. "You came back," he said, voice hoarse. "I ran again," she admitted, "because that's what I've always done. But this time it felt like losing something I hadn't even let myself want." She took a shaky step closer. "You fixed the lights that night," she said, half laughing, half crying. "Now, can you help fix me?" He didn't answer with words. He simply stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, rain cascading around them. She collapsed into him like breath returning after drowning. She smelled of petrichor and grief and something sacred, like survival. Behind them, the porch creaked. Lucy appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, is the princess back?" Elena turned, startled, but Lucy was already giggling. "She's really wet," Jacob laughed, holding Elena tighter. "Yeah," he said, "she is." Elena dropped to her knees on the porch and opened her arms. Lucy hesitated, then ran straight into them. No silk robes, no high heels. Just a woman in the rain and a little girl who didn't care about bloodlines or names. They held each other while the storm passed overhead. Later that night, Jacob made tea while Elena sat curled on the couch in his dry flannel shirt. Lucy had fallen asleep in her lap, still holding the music box. "You know," Elena whispered, watching the steam rise from her cup, "my family always thought peace was something you purchased, that it came with gates and marble and power." She looked up at Jacob. "But this quiet, messy little house, this girl in my arms, this is the kind of peace you earn." Jacob leaned beside her, brushing damp hair behind her ear. "And it's yours, if you want it." "I do," she said, voice steady now. "I'm done running." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, and somewhere in the distance the last clap of thunder faded, and in its place, stillness, the kind that only comes after a storm, and stays. The old manor was gone now, sold off, stone by stone, to someone who saw only the land and not the ghosts. Elena didn't look back. In town, the former firehouse had been lovingly converted into something new. Sunlight streamed through tall, arched windows, dancing across sheet music and soft benches. Children's laughter rang in the halls, mingling with the sound of piano keys and the rustle of violin bows. At the front of the classroom, Lucy sat with perfect posture, her small fingers poised over the keys. She began to play, hesitant at first, then more confident. The melody familiar. The same lullaby from the music box, the one Elena hadn't heard in years. Elena stood in the back of the room, arms folded, smiling. No silk robe, no shadows beneath. Her eyes, just comfort, just presence. She was no longer a haunted heiress. She was Elena, teacher, survivor, and something like happy. Jacob entered quietly, wiping dust from his hands. He had been fixing a leaky pipe in the school kitchen. They exchanged a look, unspoken, easy. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "She's getting good," he whispered. "She's getting brave," Elena said. Outside, the clouds were pale and scattered. No storm in sight. But even so, the porch lights glowed warm, just in case. Elena's voice echoed softly in memory, a quiet narration carried by time. Some storms are outside, others live inside. But sometimes, if you stay until the rain stops, you find the people who'll keep the lights on for you, even at 2 a.m. And in the little school where music lived and laughter lingered, the light stayed on. Always.